अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स नमो तस्स भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा सम्बुद्धस्स. Greetings, everyone. I hope you had a good sit and your mind and your body is full of smiles. I'm going to be reading a interesting sutta called Acela Sutta, or to the Clothless Ascetic. This is from the Samyutta Nikaya, SN 12.17. I just share the link on the Zoom, so if you'd like, you can refer to this. I'm using the translation by Thanisaro Mikku. This is an interesting sutta. It touches upon the idea of non-self. Specifically, the Buddha's admonition to his students to neither be bound to a view of self existing, of a permanent eternal self existing, nor to be completely bound to the opposing view of there not being any self, but rather understand the process by which suffering comes to be, stay focused on understanding the suffering, the process that leads to it, and letting go of the suffering. Thus have I heard that on one occasion the Blessed One was staying near Rajagriha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel's sanctuary. Then early in the morning, the Blessed One, having put on his robes and carrying his bowl and outer robe, went into Rajagriha for alms. Kassapa, the clothless ascetic, saw him coming from afar. On seeing him, he went to him and on arrival exchanged courteous greetings with him. After an exchange of friendly greetings and courtesies, he stood to one side. As he was standing there, he said to the Blessed One, "We would like to question Master Gautama about a certain point, if he would take the time to answer our question." "This is not the time for a question, Kassapa. We have entered among houses." A second time, a third time. Kassapa, the clothless ascetic, said to him, "We would like to question Master Gautama about a certain point, if he would take the time to answer our question." "This is not the time for a question, Kassapa. We have entered among houses." When this was said, Kassapa, the clothless ascetic, said, "What we want to ask isn't much." So he wasn't very interested in giving up on his line of questioning. And Master Gautama acquiesced to his request. "Then ask as you like." Master Gautama, is stress and suffering self-made? Don't say that, Kassapa. Then is it other-made? Don't say that, Kassapa. Then is it both self-made and other-made? Don't say that, Kassapa. Then is it the case that stress and suffering, being neither self-made nor other-made, arises spontaneously? Don't say that, Kassapa. Then does stress and suffering not exist? It's not the case, Kassapa, that stress does not exist. Stress and suffering do exist. Well, in that case, does Master Gautama not know or see stress and suffering? Kassapa, it's not the case that I don't know or see stress and suffering. I know stress and suffering. I see stress and suffering. Now, when asked, is stress self made? You say, don't say that, Kassapa. When asked, then is it other made? You say, don't say that, Kassapa. When asked, then is it both self made and other made? You say, don't say that, Kassapa. When asked, then is it the case that stress, being neither self made nor other made, arises spontaneously? You say, don't say that, Kassapa. When asked, then does stress not exist? You say, it's not the case, Kassapa, that stress does not exist. Stress does exist. When asked, well, in that case, does Master Gautama not know or see stress? You say, Kassapa, it's not the case that I don't know or see stress. I know stress. I see stress. Then explain stress and suffering to me, Lord Blessed One. Teach me about stress and suffering, Lord Blessed One. The one who acts is the one who experiences. Amounts to the eternalist statement. Existing from the very beginning, stress is self made. The one who acts is someone other than the one who experiences. Amounts to the annihilationist statement. For one existing harassed by feeling, stress is other made. Avoiding these two extremes, the Tathagat teaches the Dhamma via the middle. So before the Buddha goes on to explain how he teaches the understanding of stress and suffering, so I'll just take a pause at this point and just lay a little bit of context. So when Kassapa is talking about suffering being self-made or other-made, so in this particular context, in this situation, he's not talking about other people, but it is actually coming from the confusion between the views of an eternal self versus a non-existence of self. So let us examine these two views and what the Buddha has to say about this. Right. So the Buddha, as well as the way Kassapa is asking the question, when Kassapa says stress is self-made, the understanding is that it is the same self that is causing action, that is undertaking actions, that is resulting in eventual unpleasant experiences or dissatisfaction for the same person. That it is the very same person who experiences the action, who experiences the results of the action, and so on. So this is the so even if we don't go into the understanding of a permanent self or the lack of a permanent self beyond a human existence, even if we look at it from a moment to moment, we know from our experience that we are always in flux. Our minds are always in flux. If you look at all the aggregates, if you look at your form is continuously in flux from being a small child to becoming a full grown adult, experiencing different symptoms of aging. We know that our form undergoes continuous changes. If you look at any of the other aggregates, the feeling or sensation that we get with respect to some event happening around us. So there may be something that you really enjoyed as a child, some kind of food, and you're no longer as excited about it. It could be some kind of candy, for instance, right? So our sensation related to certain things are subject to continuous change. If we look at the concepts that we have for different experiences in life, they are also continuously changing. So your idea of fairness, your idea of respect, your idea of the human body, starting from being a child and not having much of an idea to maybe going through school and understanding anatomy and how the human body works. Right? Multiple things. The way we understand the world, the way we apply concepts to different situations, the way we model our environment, that also continuously changes. The way we are able to cognize things also continuously changes. Before you were exposed to any kind of musical training, you might not be able to have a sense of what is being sung in tune or sung off tune. But if you are trained in that, you will be able to make sense of that. You'll be able to identify, you'll be able to discern the quality of musicality in a performance, for instance. Right? So your ability to process information, your consciousness is also undergoing changes. And at the base of all of these is the conditioning, the sankhara or the fabrications, the way we are put together, the personality that we assume. It changes from time to time in the same day. You have a different personality before you sit and meditate. You have a different personality as soon as you come out of your meditation, right? So your conditioning, underlying conditioning is changing, not just due to actions in the deep past, but also actions that are happening right now, context that is happening right now. If you're really hungry, your behavior is very likely to change because the underlying conditioning is changing. So, as an understanding of this, the Buddha always says that whatever is there in your experience, any kind of permanent eternal self is not reflected in this. Your experiences are happening through the coming together of things that are continuously in flux. There is nothing permanent. There may be a continuity of experience, but there is nothing permanent underlying called the self that exists in one's experience. At the same time, the Buddha doesn't go so far as to refute that no, there is no self, the self exhausts or annihilates in the moment. It comes up in the moment and the self is completely annihilated. Right? So the annihilationist view, again, if you look at a human lifespan, that view holds that there is nothing after death. There is a complete vacuum. Whatever is there is during your that experience is there in the lifetime. There is no continuity. If you look at it from a moment to moment perspective, the annihilationist view says that the self that you're experiencing right now and the self that you experience a little while later, they're radically different person that has nothing to do with one other. And the Buddha always holds that these, again, this is a view. There is no way for you to confirm that this is the case, that there is no underlying self, right? Instead, he says, look at the process of how experience is generated, look at the process of how stress and suffering is created, and look at how to diffuse the underlying conditions for stress and suffering. So the Buddha's focus is always clear when asked about any metaphysical questions. His answer is always, I teach only one thing, and that is the ending of stress and suffering. So, given this context, right, the idea of a permanent self or the idea of a annihilationist self, right? So, the idea of a permanent self can make one extremely fearful for the protection of one's future self, of oneself going forward in the future. It can make one extremely resentful of the actions that we have done in the past. And the same thing extends to other people as well. If somebody acts in a certain way in a weak moment, we can easily characterize that this is how they are. This is how they always behave. They never do this thing or the other. Right. So the mistake of looking at a permanent self can lead to getting stuck in a lot of views that are not helpful in us leading a happy life, but rather make it difficult. Because once we have these views, we find it difficult to change, we find it difficult to accept the shortcomings of other people, we find it difficult to be compassionate. On the other extreme, the annihilationist view can lead to two kind of things. It can lead to a complete lack of motivation, right? So I am existing just in this moment. So why should I bother myself with improving myself? Why should I bother myself with learning things that are useful? Why should I bother myself with improving my life? And the other part can be a complete embrace of unwholesome actions. Why don't I do something unwholesome? Because it's someone else who's going to experience the fruits of it. I'm here just for this moment, so let me make the most of it. So it's as if one is being given last wishes on death row at every moment. So when one is overeating or indulging in actions that are harmful to oneself and others without any conception of the consequences of one's actions, you can say that an annihilationist view is taking over. And while we may not actively think about or subscribe to either of the views, our actions are typically oscillating between these two views. One where we think of ourselves as permanent selves, our others as permanent selves, and perform unwholesome actions, and one in which we think that there are no consequences that we are going to experience for our actions, and therefore might as well set the world on fire, right? Which is the annihilationist view. Avoiding these two extremes, the Tathagat teaches the Dhamma via the middle. From ignorance as a requisite condition come fabrications or sankhara. From fabrications as a requisite condition comes consciousness or vijnana. From consciousness as a requisite condition come name and form or mentality materiality, which is namarupa. From name and form as a requisite condition come the six sense media: the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. Shadayatam. From the six sense media as a requisite condition comes contact or phasa. From contact as a requisite condition comes feeling or vedana. From feeling as a requisite condition comes craving, tanha. From craving as a requisite condition comes clinging, upadan. From clinging as a requisite condition come habitual tendencies, bhav. From becoming as a requisite condition comes birth or jati. From birth as a requisite condition, then aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair come into play. Such is the origination of this entire mass of stress and suffering. Now, from the remainderless fading and cessation of that very ignorance comes the cessation of fabrications. From the cessation of fabrications comes the cessation of consciousness. From the cessation of consciousness comes the cessation of mentality, materiality. From the cessation of mentality, materiality comes the cessation of the six sense bases. From the cessation of the six sense bases comes the cessation of contact. From the cessation of contact comes the cessation of feeling. From the cessation of feeling comes the cessation of craving. From the cessation of craving comes the cessation of clinging. From the cessation of clinging comes the cessation of habitual tendencies. From the cessation of habitual tendencies comes the cessation of the birth of reaction. From the cessation of the birth of reaction, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair all cease. Such is the cessation of this entire mass of stress and suffering. When this was said, Kassapa, the clothless ascetic, said, "Magnificent Lord, magnificent." Just as if he were to place upright what was overturned, to reveal what was hidden, to show the way to one who was lost, or to carry a lamp into the dark so that those with eyes could see forms. In the same way has the Blessed One, through many lines of reasoning, made the Dhamma clear. I go to the Blessed One for refuge, to the Dhamma and to the Sangha. Let me obtain the going forth in the Blessed One's presence. Let me obtain admission. And there is a bit about how he undergoes the probation and eventually joins the Sangha and becomes a Arahant. So that is the discourse of the Buddha to the clothless ascetic was very persistent, even when the Buddha was not prepared to answer his questions. And our the focus of this sutta is quite simply the doctrine of self, of a permanent eternal self. and the doctrine of non-existence of a permanent eternal self. These are both speculative views. We may have a sense of these, we may have a sense of self, we may have a sense of the disappearance of self. But beyond that, saying that this is what is eternal, the existence of a self or the non existence of a self, that is a speculative view. And with that speculative view as foundation, we can come to a lot of conclusions that may take us away from the goal of actually understanding stress and suffering and taking actions to alleviate stress and suffering in our lives and those of others. That is simply what the Buddha says. Stop thinking about who you are as a person, start thinking of who you are as a process. Understand the process that leads to suffering and understand that there is a continuity to this. Every link of dependent origination is setting in motion other chains of dependent origination. Every action that is happening through a reaction is changing your conditioning, it is changing your consciousness, your perception, your understanding, it is influencing that. There is a continuity. If you throw a rock in the air, don't expect it to land on someone else's head simply because you decided to believe in the doctrine of non-existence of self, right? So we need to be practical, and for that we need to understand the process by which suffering is caused. We can take a moment to reflect, a minute to reflect on this, and happy to hear everyone's thoughts, reflections, any questions, any comments, any insights that relate to your own experience. So you can take a minute to just simply reflect on this so far. All right. Happy to see some faces. One of the things I really like from some of the talks of the Buddha, which is reflected here as well, is about asking and framing the right question. And often in life, we are not asking the right question. And often when we start a question with who, the answer eventually starts getting mixed up in the ideas of self and non-existence of self. Right? So that's something I take away. Then this is true in a number of suttas, right? And when we start framing questions in the sense of who did this or who is responsible, somebody has to be responsible, right? Who is right and who is wrong? So we end up mixing up these doctrines, different doctrines of self in that. So that's something useful to take away.
I have a question.
Hello, Andre.
Hi. The sutta is quite clear, but I actually wanted to ask if it's the same Kassapa as the Maha Kassapa, or are they different?
I actually looked for that. I don't think it is the same Kassapa. Because the origins of the Mahakassapa are little different. He's not shown as joining a group of clothless ascetics, right? So yeah, but I'm not an expert in the history of different arahants. So, but I did try to look for it now to see if it was the Mahakassapa.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Rajiv, but I vaguely remembered someone saying that the name Kassapa is quite common at that time. There were many.
It's common even now.
Oh, it's common even now. Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, and not just in the. It's not just a Buddhist name, right? So certain names get used primarily in Buddhist context, but like Sariputra or Mughal, they typically get used in more in a Buddhist context. But in the ancient Indic culture, I think Kashyapa is a pretty common name.
Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you. I just have a short comment and then followed by a question. So I've been, because World Mental Health Day just passed, and I don't know what it's like in different parts of the world, but here it's getting more important because the mental health statistics are really not looking very promising. And so a lot of, maybe it's because I was watching some YouTube, and we had a clinical psychologist come to our office, and you know, she or her colleague practices the one that John Kabat-Zinn promotes, MBSR.
MBSR, yeah, mindfulness-based stress reduction. Yeah.
Yes. And then she showed a video which started off as very interesting because, again, more and more people now are linking meditation to science. And now more and more people are starting to acknowledge the fact that although a lot of meditation came from different schools of Buddhism, it is not a religion. It is really a scientific way of managing stress, etc. However, I won't mention names, but one thing that she had a perspective was that meditation is not relaxing. I almost put my hand up and said, I beg to differ. I didn't do so because there were too many people in the room to create an argument there. But I watched some other videos, maybe because the algorithm popped up in my YouTube. I can't help but notice that even till today, many scientists are very close, like really close to how the process of the brain and stress and et cetera, come up and the solution to that, but still are missing the mark. I can't help but notice that even from the Buddha's time, so many people went to him, and it's like they're almost there, but they are missing that you know what, if you know what I mean. And the Buddha has such great wisdom that he just knows at that moment how to change the perspective of the person to question it, you know. And I really liked how you mentioned just earlier. I totally agree. Most of the time, we are not asking the right questions, I myself included. We keep coming from the perspective of who is involved, who is doing this, who is doing that. And the Buddha is the one that is like, hang on a sec, it's not who, it's what's happening. Or,
What's the
Bhante
process?
Balaramsi, would say, not even what's, like how is the process happening?
Yeah.
We should be questioning, we should be, asking, we're asking the wrong question. We're starting from the wrong beginning, so to speak, altogether. And that's why, we keep missing the mark. So every time I see a video, there's a lot going on YouTube right now, Dr. So-and-so, etc. And they're like this close, and then I'm like, yeah, just that little bit. Okay. But anyway, my question actually is, I don't get asked very often, but when I do share with someone that, I do a bit meditation to help with stress management, then the question will come back is, oh, so what form of what kind of meditation do you do? And I just can't help but think, should I tell them, oh, I meditate on loving kindness? Or should I tell them, actually, the meditation that I practice is a form of behavioral change?
Interesting. So a few things that you mentioned, very nice thing. So I think the World Mental Health Day is indeed like increasing in importance and across the world. I think it is commonly happening. And one thing that we're going to see is that, unfortunately, as you mentioned, that the statistics are not pointing in the right direction, and I expect to wholly see that. And the reason is quite simple, and all of us are aware of it, right? Which is simply that the way we interact with different media, right? And naturally, it has become apparent to we people running different media businesses is that getting hold of your attention, competing for your attention by creating sensations in you that bring up craving. That is the best way to hold your attention, and holding your attention is the best way to monetize your behavior, right? Influence your behavior and monetize that. And the ability to do this in a way that surpasses your own ability to manage your mind is just growing exponentially. So unfortunately, I don't want to be a doomsday naysayer, but I do see that this is going to become worse before it gets better, and the getting better is going to happen because of these things. And I think John Kabat-Zinn's efforts have been exemplary in terms of working very hard to create this as a almost as a prescriptive medicine, right? Being able to bringing the medical community to actually look at meditation seriously, looking at the neuroscience that surrounds it, and actually creating different formulations for people with different issues, right? So it's been a great effort, and I think it needs to be further augmented with the understanding of twin, right? So the understanding of craving. I think the understanding of craving is what is substantially missing as being a central piece in most of the meditation tradition, right? So and same with dependent origination as well as craving. So these are words. The mechanisms themselves are not being understood, as closely enough. And I think what you said is perfectly valid, right? So in terms of saying meditation for behavioral change, right? And again, so there are two things, right? So one is the practice of the meditation. So you can talk about using loving kindness as an object of meditation, and then is the outcome, right? And outcome as behavior change is, I think, perfect, right? So we want to move towards wholesome behavior, right? And stress management, unfortunately, also is not very well understood by people, right? So you can talk about two things: behavior change and changing the way. I mean, one interesting word that Sam Harris uses is a new operating system for your mind, right? Which is also a good way to look at it. I have, in fact, anytime I've had a deep experience, and when I communicate with David, who's been my mentor for the longest time, I normally tell him I've had a reboot of my operating system. Right? It's a great way for me to understand, maybe because of the tech, knowledge. But yeah, that's essentially what you're doing, right? You're rewiring your mind for happiness, and that's another way to look at it, right? So yeah, I think the interest and curiosity in meditation is growing greatly, and you should feel free to actually don't assume that people know less, right? So they know and they are curious. So I think having experienced so many benefits for yourself, you should share more with them as well, right? So the understanding of meditation. One of the things that I like to share is which helps people understand quite easily is the three skills, right? So simply collectedness, being able to keep your mind with something you intend to do, something that is wholesome for you, right? Mindfulness, that allows you to detect when your mind has drifted away to something unwholesome or unrelated, and right effort to come back. Just these three skills, right? So even if you don't want to get into a detail of impermanence and nonsense, the three characteristics which can become very heavy, just talking about these three skills, I think everybody is aware that they're really suffering from attention deficit because of the use of electronic devices, and this is something that can create curiosity. So if you wish to share your good fortune by planting more seeds, I think this is one easy way to help them understand that.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you so much. I really like that. The meditation practice that I'm doing is I'm basically rewiring my brain towards happiness. I think that will, hopefully it will pick some interest, and then from there, then I can go further. So thank you for the tip. It's very nice.
You're welcome.
Sorry,
Yes,
actually,
please go ahead.
I just have another short comment. I can't help myself today for some reason, but I think those of us who are exposed to, Bhante Vimalaramsi's effort into, he right from the beginning, he mentioned so many times, asked so many teachers before him, what is the definition of craving? I think because of Bhante's effort, and that definition, that craving is the tension and tightness that arises in the mind and body, was so key. Like Rajivji, you were saying, it's so key and absolutely right. It's because of that lack of understanding that people are just missing that mark. I
Yeah.
strongly agree.
Yeah, I think so. I'll just qualify what you said. So, craving is not the tension and tightness. Craving is accompanied with tension and tightness in your mind and body. Craving simply says that I need something to change in the world for me to be happy. It just says I cannot accept things as they are. I need something to change. Only then will I be happy. Right? It is like a nagging boss. It's like, it's all great, but why don't you change one more thing? So it'll be better. So yeah, and the fact that it is accompanied by, so there is something very interesting. There's a scientist called Herbert Benson who studied transcendental meditation, and he actually found great benefits from relax, and he found used different techniques to just relax. And there's something called the Herbert relaxation response, so which completely puts your body from sympathetic or fight and flight mode to the healing parasympathetic mode. So obviously he did not connect it with the rest of the Buddha's teachings and all, but there is some very interesting literature around that too. So the act of relaxing actually completely changes your the state of fear or state of agitation that your entire mind body system is in, right? So that's something interesting. That let me just share a link to that also. He has a book called The Relaxation Response as well. Yes. So I'm not sure if this is the best article, but it's a point you can take off from if you want to read more about it. So the relaxed step has also been, in a way, studied in independence, right? And I think one of our endeavors as this community is to be able to, along with our own development, be able to share this, the beautiful bringing together of all these understandings by Bante to as many people as we can. Great. So we can take one more question, or we can end the session with sharing of merits.
Rajivji, Paul posted a question on the chat.
Right. So, great question, Paul. Could you say something more about the annihilationist view? If my skillful actions today don't affect me, only a future me, why should I care? So, I'll just take your mind to something that we read a little while ago, few weeks ago, which is the five remembrances, right? So, if you remember the five remembrances, so let me just recap because it's useful to always hear these things multiple times. So, I am subject to aging. I have not gone beyond aging. I am subject to illness, have not gone beyond illness. I am subject to death, have not gone beyond death. I must be separated from all that is dear and beloved, appealing to me. Right? So these are the first four. And then comes the fifth one. I am the owner of my karma or my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, and have my actions as my arbitrator. Whatever I do, for good or for evil, to that will I fall heir. Right? So this is the eventual thing that we need to understand. So even if we understand that the sense of self that is arising may be different in the future than it is today, the consequences of our actions, right? The consequences of our actions will follow. And how do these consequences follow? So the actions that you're taking today are affecting your conditioning, your ability. If you perform an unwholesome action with craving, you are strengthening your tendency to look at that situation with craving. You're strengthening that in your conditioning. This is essentially ignorance, right? Taking things personally, not understanding that it is part of a impersonal process. When we do that, when we take things personally, we reinforce. We are teaching our mind. Our mind is like a sponge. Every time we teach it something, it's like a child watching its parent, right? So if the parent screams at someone, the child learns that in such a situation, I should scream at someone. If the parent is kind to someone, the child learns that in such a situation, I should be kind to someone. So the actions that you do, first of all, they are coloring the your ability to not take things personally and to stay away from suffering. So if you reduce the craving, if you don't take things personally, if you stay away from suffering, you're strengthening that understanding for your future, right? And if you take it personally, so it is affecting you in the present as well as in the future, right? And your ability to not take it personally at that point and not to blame yourself from the past is also getting weakened. So in that, you're likely to go ahead thinking it is me, thinking that I did the wrong things, thinking that I'm to be blamed and getting miserable about it. So you're guaranteeing suffering right now as well as in the future. So it is unlikely to happen. Uh, but it's interesting. There is also something that the Buddha says that looking at things that are pleasant to do now, pleasant later, pleasant to do now, painful later, painful to do now, but pleasant later, and painful to do now, but painful later. So it's quite obvious that something that is painful later is something that can be avoided, especially if it is also painful right now. So your question can be if something feels pleasant right now, but painful later. So why should I care? And it is simply that when you are unable to see that the action is unwholesome and leading to your harm, it is typically under the influence of craving. And if there is craving now, it is going to lead to your suffering in the current moment also. It is going to make things worse for you later. You have to go through those experiences, but likely whatever you're doing with craving right now is going to create suffering for you at the current moment also. So don't think that this is going to end well and somebody else has to pay the price for it. They went a little bit roundabout on that one, but I think the understanding is primarily that there is a continuity of the processes. So every action, the ignorance in every action, the craving in every action is coloring the next set of actions, and so on, right? And the fruits of it are felt immediately as consequences. And definitely, unwholesome actions have consequences in the present as well as in the future. And wholesome actions are likely to have wholesome consequences in the present as well as the future. So when you look at it as a process, that is good. And secondly, you can also look again at your question. So your question says, why should I care? So you can also ask yourself if that is the right question to ask. You're welcome. Okay, then let's share some merit and continue smiling for the rest of the day. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless free. May the grieving shed all grief. May all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share in this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sa, sa, sa. Lovely week, everyone. See you again soon.
Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you, everyone.